Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and this time we're going to explain how the history tool works. Okay, now let's explain a couple of things that probably you already know, but anyway, I'm going to explain them. When you want to choose a different material, for example, here in this scene, I have created several materials, only three. You go here and choose a different material. The problem is you may end up at some point adding all those materials. I mean, of course a hypothetical scenario. You may create a lot of materials inside your scene. And you create a lot of materials because you want to test different settings, you want to test different ideas, you want to see what works best and what works. And because sometimes a simple undo doesn't do the trick, you want to actually be able to go back into specific material. So this must be one version of the material, this can be another version of the material, this can be another version of the material. But you may end up with 10, 20 materials, and you may realize that from all these 20 materials, you only need 2 or 3, the ones that are interest you. But you cannot remove them in any way. The only way to actually remove them or to actually organize them is to save the blend, and if the material is not assigned, then it's actually deleted by Blender. So Blender deletes any material that is not assigned to an object or any material that is not has not enabled a fake user, the fake user add-on, which actually forces Blender to save the material even if it's not assigned to any object. But there's a better way to actually do this. And here is actually where History Tools comes in. It helps you organize your materials. If you have many materials on your scene, it helps you keep track of the materials that matters most, the materials you use the most, the materials you care most. So, how you do it? Well, let's start by saying that we have several materials here. Already it's a mess. You can see I have to scroll down. It's very difficult for me to scroll down, to go up, and it's not the most convenient way. So let's create a new material. Okay, let's assign this. Let's hit random material. And now we have created a new material. Let's disable textures here. We don't need textures. And let's disable the textures here. So we have this new material. Before I'm starting anything, I have to actually say here that the history tool works for a random material generator. It also works for a random texture generator. It's not a different version of this tool. It's the same tool. The parameters are the same. They are shared between these two tools. So because history, the reason why I haven't replicated another history tool for random textures because history tool stores materials, and inside materials, of course, textures are stored. And you can store not only materials that are randomized, you can store any material, you can even store node material, you can even store normal material with node textures. It's up to you. Any kind of materials can be stored. So I want to actually put a material inside my history. So how I do that? I click store. When you click store, what happens is that the history index points to the material you have stored. It doesn't actually store the material inside the history. What it actually is doing, it tells the history index 1 that history index 1 represents random material 002. If I go and change this material, the same thing will change inside the history. So it doesn't actually store the settings of the material, it only stores the name of the material and what material we use for this particular index. So let's create another material. For example, let's create this material. Okay, 3. Let's store it in index 2. You can actually change the index here, 1, 2. Let's change it this way, and let's click and store now. Now, if I want to activate material index 1, what will happen? Let's go to activate index 1 and click activate. Sorry, that shouldn't happen. Let me see. Let's go back to index 1. Maybe I haven't stored it correctly. Let's store 2 again. Yeah, here. Okay. Let's go back to history 1 and activate. Okay, now it works. What happened here is actually history tells one thing. It tells that the one material you have in index 1, one that you refer to, is going to be the active one. So when you activate it, it becomes your active assigned material. So if you go to 2 and you click activate, you see it changes again. So you actually can browse through different materials without any problem. But again, we're actually doing 2 clicks, one to decrease the index and one to activate. There's a way to actually do this in a single click, and this is the up, the previous, and the next buttons. The previous button, you see, immediately changes. The next button immediately changes. It's the same thing as changing here and activating. There's nothing different. This button here is the first indexed. It sends us in the first index. And this one is the last index. It's sending the last index. If you proceed here, you see it says empty index. So it actually says you that I haven't stored anything here. If you go here, you say not the first index. Why this happens? Why it says not the first index? The reason why it says not the first index is because I want you to store each index in a sequence. I don't want to leave gaps inside the history. I want the history to be organized, and I want every index until the final index to have a material. So for matters of organization, you cannot store in an index that is not the first empty index. You can actually store only on the first empty index. And here you see it enables the store button. Okay. Now we see another buttons as well. Let's explain them very, very fast. One of the features that people have asked me a lot was that they really wanted not only random materials, but actually random animatable materials. So what that means? That means that actually a material that is randomizes parameters, but it's also randomize them as we animate those parameters. Let's explain how this happens. First, let's animate this exact material, the settings of this material. Let's click animate. The first thing that happens if we go here, we see actually everything is yellow. The reason why all this is yellow is because every parameter here has been inserted a key frame. So every parameter here is stored inside our animation. Let's randomize the material again. Okay, now if we go the timeline and we go, let's say, to 60, yeah, somewhere here, 61, let's go 60. Okay, and then we animate again. Again, we see that it has created the keyframes. If we go now here, why? Maybe because it was the first. Okay, let's try this then. Random again. Animate. And let's see now what happens. You see, the first thing we see is that we have created a random animated material. We actually see a randomization and animation of the colors, of the intensity, even of the transparency. So you can actually create very cool effects. You can actually create materials that animate and change all the time while your animation is playing. So I think that's going to create a very interesting result. I don't know why this didn't work as expected and didn't create the animation. Here it should, but I'm going to debug it and see if there's any problem here. So if we want to finish, if we want to remove keyframes from a specific timeline, for example, we actually insert in frame 1. Let's remove them. Press X. And that's it. It's removed. You see? There's no yellow line, which means there's no keyframe there that is going to store our material parameters. Another feature that is very useful, and people ask me a lot, when I created a random material generator, people actually believe that it was actually a random assigner of materials. There's a difference between a random material generator. The generator actually creates a random material, it randomizes the parameters. A random assigner of a material, it doesn't randomize the parameters of the material. What it randomizes is where the material is assigned to, in which material is assigned to which object. Why this is useful? This is useful for people that actually like to have a preset amount of materials. Let's say that you have 4 materials and you want to assign those 4 materials to hundreds, even thousands of objects inside your scene. Uh, and you actually want to do this in a very random way. This is actually can be done with a random assignment. So random assignment or a random activation if you want, it can actually operate like this. Let's select multiple materials. Let's first remove the material here, and let's select here several materials. Now, let's hit randomization. See what happens. We have random here, random 3 here, and random 2 here. If we continue the randomization, the random assignment, you'll see, of course, because we have only 2 materials, you see that we get pretty much the same choices. But if you had in the index inside here, because you have to realize it takes the materials that assigned the index. So if you currently we only have 2 materials, you see, only 2. If we had 10, 12, then we will have a lot more variable results. So in the end, the final thing that I want to explain is the delete, which is very simple. You actually delete the index, it's nothing spectacular. And of course, it doesn't leave any gaps. As I said earlier, I don't want gaps to leave. So when you delete something, the previous index becomes, the next index becomes your current index. So it actually removes, it's like the backspace in your keyboard, nothing different. And delete start from delete end is like selecting a text and then delete it. You select from the first character, for example, to the 10th character. And then you delete any text between those characters. And the same thing happens here. You can start your deletion from index, for example, you can start your deletion from index 3 and then end your deletion in index 10. Delete starts the deletion, delete ends, end the deletion. The important thing is that delete start is default set in the first index, which is the start of the history. So you don't have actually to set it in the first index. It's already set by default. All you have to do, for example, if I want to delete until 2, I'm going to go to 2 and delete it. It's going to keep the final one. It doesn't delete the final one, but if I want to delete the final, I do a delete and that's it. The final thing that was requested for the history tool is the ability to actually save the history with our blend file. In the old version, you couldn't do that. You were losing the history every time you exit Blender. This time in this version, this no longer happens. You save the history with your blend file. But when you load your blend file back, when you load the blend file and you have a history, let's say, of 20 materials, those materials are not automatically loaded because I want to give the ability to the user to decide whether he wants to load the history or he doesn't. The history is not lost, but it's not loaded. In order to load it, you hit the restore button. And if you do a restore, that's it, everything is restored. The history is stored in your scene every time you change the parameter, and of course, it's saved together with your blend file. So this is the history tool. You can use the history tool with random material generator, or you can use it with random texture generator. I hope you enjoyed this tool and helps you to organize your materials a bit better and enjoying random animation of materials, random assignment of materials, and of course the ability to really activate it, for example, to assign, excuse me, let's store this here. For example, I can assign, you see, I can assign all the materials with activation, or it's an easy way to activate and select materials and assign materials. And I think that you're going to find the history tool very useful. Thank you for watching and see you in the next tutorial. Bye-bye.